One of the biggest holes that people like to poke with intermittent fasting is that you're not actually burning more fat, you're just eating less calories. Now, I can see where that argument comes in, but when you start looking at the cool science with metabolic flexibility, you can see that it's not apples to apples. The body can change the substrates in which it is burning. And this is where things are really cool. But it's not just about the substrates that your body is burning. It's about the flexibility and how fast your body's able to shift gears. And I know that sounds a little wild, but if you're new to intermittent fasting, this is going to blow your mind. And if you already do intermittent fasting, this is going to excite you and possibly give you a new tool. So by the end of this video, I'll give you a different strategy that you can play around with to advance your intermittent fasting. But if you're new to intermittent fasting, it might just give you a jumping off point. So let's go ahead and let's jump in. First, please do hit that red subscribe button, and then please hit that little bell icon and select all notifications. That way you never miss a beat when we're posting up daily, sometimes twice daily videos. Then after this video, please do check out Natural Heaven down below in the description. They are a hearts of palm made pasta. Super cool, super low carb, super high in fiber, really good stuff, and just a great spaghetti squash alternative, a great pasta alternative in general. And honestly, you can't knock it till you try it. So please check them out. Special link down below. And thank you for supporting this channel, Natural Heaven. Now, let's get into this study. So this study was published in the journal Obesity. Okay, and it took a look at two different kinds of diets, okay, two different eating patterns. Early time-restricted feeding, where they ate for 6 hours and fasted for 18 hours, okay, versus a control group, which they ate for 12 hours and fasted for 12 hours. So in essence, it was an 18-hour fast versus a 12-hour fast, not to find if one is good or bad, but to determine what happens with calories? What happens with metabolic flexibility? Does one burn more calories than the other? Does one burn more fat or more carbohydrates than the other? Well, they found out. So here's what it looked like. They would have each group do each respective diet. One group did the 12-hour fast, one group did the 18-hour fast. They got all the results. Then they had a 3.5 to 5 week washout period where they went back to normal eating, and then they flip-flopped. The group that did one before did the other. This way they could get some pretty good data. This is called a washout period. Okay, both groups ate isocaloric amounts. They ate the exact same amount of calories, okay? Nothing really changed. It was the same food, just different patterns and time in which you would eat. Okay, now the first 2 days, 1 to 2 days of the study, they simulated free living conditions, which means they had them eat specific things at home, going through sort of their daily life, so it was practical. Then on the third day, they ate in a supervised setting in a lab. And then on the fourth day, they put both groups into what is called a respiratory chamber, and they fed them identical meals. And the reason they did this is they wanted to see how each respective participant in each group would respond to the food that they're consuming when they're really watching everything. Now, in a respiratory chamber, it gives you the ability to measure expelled gases and measure exactly what is being burned. Is fat being burned? Is carbohydrate being burned? What is being burned? What is being utilized? How many calories are being expended? So we could really see that data. Now, this is where things get really cool. Okay, so remember, with the early time-restricted feeding group, the 18-hour fast group, they ate at 8 a.m., 11 a.m., and 2 p.m. Then they started the fast. The other group, the control group, ate at 8 a.m., 2 p.m., and 8 p.m. Okay? Very clean, very simple. So the goal of this study was to measure the metabolic flexibility, which we'll talk about in a second. Also wanted to measure hunger hormones and their body's response, but also wanted to measure how much energy they would expend. Well, get ready for these results. Okay, this is wild. Neither group was better than the other when it came down to energy expenditure. They both expended the same amount of energy. What's funny is the early time restricted feeding group burned a little bit more energy during the day, about 50 calories more, but they burned less at night. So it ended up balancing out. That's kind of irrelevant. We're not really worried about the calories. So they burned the same amount of calories, but what they did find is the fuel that was burned, the substrate that was actually utilized for energy, was wildly different between the two groups. The early time restricted feeding group, the group that fasted for 18 hours, they utilized much more in the way of fat. Their fatty acid oxidation rates were significantly higher, indicating that even when they were eating, their bodies were utilizing fats more. So when they actually measured them in the respiratory chamber while they were eating, their bodies were using fat more than carbohydrates. Whoa. And just for those of you that are nerds that want to know, they do this by using what is called a non-protein respiratory quotient. It's crazy mathematical stuff, but ultimately it comes back down to the lower the number, the lower the quotient, the more fatty acid oxidation is occurring. The higher the quotient, the more carbohydrate oxidation that's occurring. Anyway, kind of irrelevant. But what's actually the most intriguing about this, I mean, it's cool. It's cool that the body used more fat. Okay, yes, that's great. But what's really cool is that metabolic flexibility increased. Now, what is metabolic flexibility? Metabolic flexibility is your body's ability to switch gears from fat burning to carbohydrate burning really quick. We don't want to just be fat burning machines. Despite what anyone on YouTube says, despite what any guru says, we do not just want to be fat burning machines because our bodies still have glucose. We want to be able to switch gears. So by achieving a higher degree of metabolic flexibility, it means that the body was able to go from utilizing fat to utilizing carbohydrates like that. And the early time-restricted feeding group, the group that fasted for 18 hours, developed better metabolic flexibility because they could tell when these people would eat carbohydrates and fat, their body could switch gears really quick compared to the other group. This is exactly what we want, because what we don't want is to consume carbohydrates and have our body be inefficient at processing them so that we end up with high blood sugar, we end up with issues. We want our body to respond to the carbohydrates, we just don't want to eat a lot of them, right? Now, they also found that protein oxidation increased in the early time-restricted feeding group, which indicates that something called gluconeogenesis, where your body utilizes protein to turn it into usable glucose, was occurring. This is not a bad thing. This is a good thing because the protein that is getting utilized is generally going to cost a higher degree of calories to burn. Point is, you're probably going to get more of a thermic effect and potentially more metabolic flexibility out of it. So what do you take from this? Well, think about it. What are you trying to apply? What can you learn from this and how can you put it into your daily life? Okay, well, what was their eating pattern? They ate in the morning and then fasted throughout the rest of the day. How do you fast? Okay, most people fast where they eat their dinner and then they fast the rest of the day and then they break their fast around 2 p.m., whatever. Try this different strategy because clearly, although this isn't a massive study, it's big enough to indicate that, wow, even with that washout period, try fasting in the afternoon and evening and overnight. Well, then the theory behind that is that your body's going to go through that fatty acid utilization. It's going to start, and by the time you go to bed, you're quite frankly burning fat at night a little bit more, which is kind of cool. Then you wake up in the morning, you work out in a fasted state, and you break your fast. It's just something to try. And if you're just new to fasting, then this might be a way for you to do it. You don't have to fall victim to just the simple breaking your fast at 2 p.m. every day. You don't have to skip breakfast, eat breakfast, and maybe skip dinner. Anyhow, as always, I appreciate you being here, keeping locked into my channel, and I'll see you tomorrow for the next video.